Is Trump already disqualified from running for president? That's the argument being advanced by two actually conservative Federalist Society law professors in a new paper that they wrote for the University of Pennsylvania Law Review. William Bowd and Michael Stokes-Paulsen argue that the 14th Amendment bans anyone from holding federal office who, quote, engaged in insurrection or rebellion or has, quote, given aid and comfort to rebels. This provision of the Constitution was obviously meant to apply to former leaders of the Confederacy, but the law professors argue that it also applies to Trump following the events of January 6th. So this is getting some interesting pickup, obviously. Our legal folks at Reason wrote about it. I saw Vox write about it, and actually the New York Times piece as well. It is wild, the argument being advanced here. I don't know if you want to go into more detail on it. It's in the 14th Amendment and was clearly meant to apply, the Confederacy could not hold office. But because it's not written in a way to exactly specifically, like the wording to apply just to Confederates. Obviously, this would be argued about. A lot of people say Trump, there was a riot that happened.
There was no insurrection. It wasn't a coup.
It wasn't a coup. It wasn't a rebellion. Trump didn't participate in, all those things aside. But all those things, which I think, when it comes to the criminal prosecution of Trump, I bring up all those things. I agree with a lot of those points. I think it might be more difficult than a lot of the prosecutors trying to charge Trump think right now when you're trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he organized an insurrection, all that stuff, for sure. But here, it's different. The burden of proof is actually on really the office holder, not the government to prove. For the criminal charge, the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump caused all those crimes, all those bad things. But here, the wording is akin to you have to be at least 35 to run for president. You have to be born in the U.S. You have a duty to demonstrate that. There's no proceeding. There's no ultimate hearing that happens. It's just if you're not those things, you can't be placed on the ballot.
Right. So the language of this section 3 in full, I'm going to not read the whole thing, but the meaningful parts say no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office if they have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution of the United States or an executive or judicial officer of any state, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may vote by 2/3 of each house to remove such a disability.
Right. So Congress could.
No insurrection or rebellion. Okay, you might be asking, do they define insurrection or rebellion? Well, these two law professors, Bowd and Paulsen, this is from the Vox article, that using historical and dictionary sources, they established clear definitions for the term. In their view, quote, it covers pretty much the entire terrain of large-scale unlawful resistance to government authority. Okay, to have engaged in such conduct, they claim, means being actively involved in the planning or execution of intentional acts of insurrection or rebellion, or knowingly provided active, meaningful, voluntary, direct support for material assistance to or specific encouragement of such actions. Now, this is where we get into the nitty-gritty, because my observation is a lot of the conservative coverage of the Trump election fraud indictment largely stays away from the core of the claims, which is that he instructed and conspired with others to encourage a fake slate of electors to be submitted from these 7 states where that together would flip if the votes went the other way, would flip the election for Donald Trump. Knowing that there was not actually election fraud, having been told by all of his senior attorneys, at very least, that there was no election fraud, the lawsuits not being successful in those various states, still conspired to get conservatives in those states to put their names on these fake slate of electors that would get submitted to the Library of Congress and to Vice President Pence. They were, quote, dead on arrival, but they wanted to cause sufficient confusion on the day that the election results would be certified so that they would be justified in throwing the results not to the people's voting in the states, but to Congress that would eventually nominate Trump because there were more Republican states in the House of Representatives than there were Democratic states in the House of Representatives. Okay. That's the plan. That's the alleged scheme. And if you actually have to engage with that instead of some of the accusations that this is all an attack on free speech, well, then you're getting into the gist of there being something that to a lot of people feels obviously wrong, to allegedly know that the election results did not go your way, but to try to sow enough confusion that the election no longer relies on the votes of people at the ballot box, but on Congress casting their votes in a way that is going to come out the other way, does seem very clearly to a lot of people to be an attempt to change the results of elections in a way that is anti-democratic and something that feels closer to a coup than simply saying some guys with horns on their heads and zip ties allegedly on 1/6 were doing a coup.
Right.
I mean, is that, I am interested in whether this argument forces Republicans and the Republican media to engage more with the core of these 1/6 indictment claims instead of repeating what has been a really persuasive narrative, I think, to a lot of people, including some people on the left, that you shouldn't be concerned about this because it's just a speech issue. They're trying to criminalize Trump's speech. They're really just focused on Trump and what he said on the day of 1/6, which is not actually true of what's in the core of the indictment.
Right. I should say, so we're talking about this because it's a very interesting and new kind of novel legal theory. The ramifications of it, I think, even if you like this theory, are pretty crazy. It could cause a lot of chaos. Well, the ramifications of this theory, if you buy it and you're a state election official, is that you are not supposed to put Donald Trump's name on the ballot. So what if some states do and some states don't? Obviously, there are going to be lawsuits either by Trump for not being included, Trump will sue, or arguably, if you're Chris Christie and you buy this legal theory, you could sue to have Trump's name kept off the ballot. This would need to, if anyone weaponizes this or doesn't operationalizes this, there absolutely needs to be like a Supreme Court clarification real fast. I have no idea how they would feel about this. Obviously, no Republican official would ever endorse this because the blowback from your Trump-loving people would be, even if you're Republican. So Republican elites, like the secret is, Republican elites actually don't like Trump very much, and they wish he would go away, and they would love to magically snap their fingers and be done with him. But they can't admit that, and they can't tell their voters they feel that way because their voters will kill them time and time again. Any Republican who has turned against Trump. Yeah, probably metaphorically. So they can't admit it and they can't do anything about it. They want somebody else to do something. Well, the Supreme Court, for better or for worse, is the branch that is of the government that is totally unaccountable to both the democratic process and just to like the ire of primary voters in general. Like they can do whatever they want. They don't care. So if you were looking for Trump to, if you're a Republican who magically wants Trump to go away, this probably is your best shot. It's not a great shot, but it is more compelling than any of the other, because he can run from prison.
So just so I understand, exactly. So up until this point, it wasn't necessarily the case that him losing these lawsuits, at least these criminal trials, would result in him not being able to run for president. This one's different, and it also allows, or perhaps obliges various election officials all across the country to independently, if you agree with this reading of the theory, they are required not to put this man on the ballot.
Right.
And so there's also some interesting questions about the timing of how this gets resolved. At what point do individuals act in such a way that would instigate an ability to challenge it legally and then start the process of it moving up and through the courts? And does that happen soon enough prior to the election that it doesn't end up interfering with the actual election itself? Is it unresolved at the time at which people are going to start to head to the polls and hope to vote for Donald Trump, to be able to vote for Donald Trump as the potential nominee?
I should note that Alan Dershowitz, who we've had on the show to discuss some of this stuff, who is not at all persuaded by the indictments, and we talked to him about it, he does put a lot of this stuff in the category of speech-related protected activity. He said that he reads this provision of the 14th Amendment that to clearly, in his view, only applies to members of the Confederacy. It also has some language about people having been disqualified for
but on what basis? Isn't the whole point that it doesn't contain that specific language about members of the Confederacy?
There is a part of it that refers to slavery and enslaved people that he said should be an indicator that this was only meant for the Confederacy. I'm just summarizing his argument. That was his argument.
If we start reading the Constitution that way, I mean, we have to throw out 100 years of jurisprudence, which is obviously deeply reading into stuff that was never intended by the Founding Fathers, blah, blah, blah. We have such a difficult time in this country actually doing constitutional amendments that we've all just accepted the fact that if we want to have any new rights or write anything in a way that accommodates the fact that we live with penicillin, phones, internet, machine guns, all kinds of things that the Founding Fathers never contemplated, that you can't be a strict constructionalist. And Alan Dershowitz understands that. You know, I'm very fascinated to see how this goes. Obviously, there are a lot of minds that are going to be weighing in going forward. But meanwhile, Fulton County Prosecutor Fani Willis is expected to seek more than 12 indictments in her investigation efforts by Donald Trump and his allies to overturn the 2020 presidential election result in Georgia before a grand jury this week. This according to reporting from CNN. Willis's office denied CNN's request for comment. Former President Trump, however, did not refrain from weighing in. In a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote, quote, "Would someone please tell the Fulton County grand jury that I did not tamper with the election. The people that tampered with it were the ones that rigged it." And sadly, Fani Willis, who has shockingly allowed Atlanta to become one of the most dangerous cities anywhere in the world, has no interest in seeing the massive amount of evidence available or finding out who these people that committed this crime are. She only wants to get Trump. Shout out to Alan Dershowitz. I would be happy to show this info to the GJ, the DJ, sorry, excuse me. The grand jury, rather. I think that's what that.
Grand jury.
Okay. Yeah. So he's saying the election was rigged. Yeah. Of course, none of his lawsuits manifested that reality, bore that out all across the country, certainly not in Georgia. We have the Raffensperger call. We heard him asking for that very specific number of votes to be found. People who listened to that call, some of them still believe that that is not him asking for the election results to be fiddled with, but he's going to have to make that case in a court of law. What do you make of this?
You were noting, look, I have some reservations about the indictments of Trump. I am concerned about the speech implications. That's not to say I think Trump is like some innocent little blameless baby. I supported his impeachment and his removal from office. I think the question is whether some of what he's done is just basically immoral and political malfeasance that what can you do but punish it at the ballot box. Now, prosecutors are very creative people and people get charged with stuff and you know, when you're charged with stuff, you do things wrong, you know, the obstruction of justice, everything. I think he very well could go down for all of this, some of this. And I wonder if does there become a point? I mean, this is the question. Does there become a point at which it's just so much that it does effectively prevent him from running for election? I mean, we keep saying no, that nothing is going to stop Trump, and it's not hurting him with his voter supporters. If anything, it's making him more popular. Mm-hmm. The Republican base wants Trump even harder. The practical concerns of him trying to run a campaign while going through all these trials and legal proceedings, while possibly having to fight in court over the latest theory that he's just disqualified. You said something before the show that does it really feel like it's just Trump and Biden again, even though all the poll number, their popularity and how poorly their opponents are doing against them in the primaries, everything indicates that. But is there just a vibe out there? Is there just some circumstances, like the planets are aligning, that just like maybe it's just not going to be that?
Look, on the Biden side of things, there has been a flood of pro-Kamala pieces. Mm-hmm. And the fact of Gavin Newsom very kind of publicly running a shadow campaign, scheduling these high-profile news appearances, presenting himself as the next statement in line, suggests to me that at very least on the Democratic side, there is an awareness that anything could happen, perhaps because of the health issues and age-related issues with Joe Biden. He was asked this weekend on a beach about the devastating fire in Maui, and he said no comment. I don't know if that is callous or an indication that he isn't savvy, doesn't know what's going on, or maybe he just wants to enjoy his vacation. I don't know. But these moments where he is responding in ways repeatedly that one would not expect of a man in his position suggest to me that there is some concern on the among liberals that there needs to be a replacement in the wings. On the Trump side of things, obviously he's being challenged robustly in a primary, with people like Vivek Ramaswamy now eclipsing Ron DeSantis in the polls. So there is definitely, I think, fluctuating priorities and interests among Republican voters who will remain open to considering different kind of candidates, even if Donald Trump stays at the top. And what that means for Trump if he is more seriously damaged in one of these cases is that I think things could change very rapidly. Now, I think it's more likely that it's not Biden as the Democratic nominee than that it's not Trump as the Republican nominee. But honestly, I'm ready for an October surprise. Anything can happen.
I don't think either are particular. I mean, I think it's likely it is Trump and Biden, but it's hard to contemplate. It's exhausting.
Well, what was
We're
the
rooting for
statistic?
something else.
Something like a huge chunk of the American people, over a third of Americans were open to voting for a third party candidate. It might be even closer to half of Americans. And I think that really speaks to an appetite for not having a 2020 rematch for many reasons, including that Donald Trump, nobody wants Donald Trump to be in this situation. Even if you really, really like him, I think most people would prefer to vote for a candidate that isn't being accused of rigging the last election.
Well, we need some kind of act of God. Maybe it's this. I don't know.
All right. More Rising right after this.